Hi, this is Audrey Blair, and you're listening to the Change is Hard podcast, episode 9. Hi, how are you? I am glad to be with you today. I've been a bit under the weather. Hopefully my voice isn't too distracting. This past weekend, and I don't know, all of a sudden something came up and just grabbed me. I think it was just a cold. It was swift and fast, but I filled up on some Zicam, and that really helped to shorten the progress, I think. I'm not 100%, but still, I'm definitely functioning much more easily than I was a couple days ago. So that is all good news. Anyway, when I was sick, I had some downtime. I was watching some TV. I binged a couple of shows. I'm a sports fan, and so I was checking out Full Swing, which is about the top players in tennis. And I was also checking out Breakpoint, which is, I said that backwards. Full Swing is not about tennis. It's about golf. And then Breakpoint is the top players in tennis. And it got me thinking, especially right now during this time, we're right around spring, and it's an interesting time of year for sports because there's so much going on. A few weeks ago, we had the Super Bowl. Kansas City is on top again. Love them or hate them, I think they're going to be around for a while. And it used to be in the past that after the Super Bowl, it was quiet in the NFL for a while. But now there's full focus on the draft and trades, and seems like these days the NFL is all year round. So there's all of that stuff. The NBA playoffs are starting soon. Formula One just recently kicked off in the last week or two. Tennis is in full swing. I think right now as I speak, Indian Wells tournament is going on. And spring baseball is happening, which if you're a baseball fan, the sport of the summer, that's underway. PGA Tour is underway. For the climbers out there, bouldering season has ended, but now it's ropes season. I had to throw that last one in just a tribute to my daughter. She's a climber, and we just finished up bouldering season, which she did really, really well. And now this weekend, we're actually going to a qualifying event for rope season. I got to tell you, just side note, that sport is a really cool sport. So if your kids are not your kind of traditional team sport, football, soccer, softball, baseball, or whatever. My kids were more into different kind of sports. We tried those things and they lasted for a little while and they were like, nah, I'm out. Give climbing a try. I think, and I know sometimes once they reach a certain level, because I'm at this level now where it's starting to feel very dangerous, because now my daughter wants to go outdoors. For Christmas, she wanted a crash pad, which is literally a pad that if you're climbing outdoors, you put on the rocks on the ground. So if you fall, you can, fall on something soft. But the sport itself, I'm growing to love more and more for several reasons. Partly because the community is fantastic. It's very supportive. And while they are competitors and they're competing with each other, they're also very supportive because it's one of those sports that even if you're on a team, it's still more individualized. And so your teammates are your teammates and they're your competitors. And then when you go to tournaments, all the results are individual. But there's a lot of cheering on and the community itself is really cool. But I also love it because of so many of the lessons that are learned through the sport and the mindset that is required or gets built as you're going through this, because there's a lot of failing. There's a lot of strategy. You're looking at the wall and trying to make rhyme or reason of how you're going to accomplish this thing. There's a lot of technicality. I could go on and on, but in any case, it's fun to watch. Sometimes I also will judge the competitions. And so being able to see the difference between the competitors and seeing the growth in their mindset is a lot of fun. And as I said, got me thinking about not just sports, but also just champions. Like those who win a lot, winners. And I want to talk about, what are some of the things that they do really well to maintain their consistency at winning? And how can we apply these things to leadership and from a leadership perspective? there is definitely something consistent about champions that sets them apart from others. And it's not always about skill, because yes, skill is involved. At a certain point, the differentiation of skill at the upper levels is relatively small, unless you have some extreme outlier. So what is it that sets them apart? So I want to talk a little bit about those ideas. And I want you to think about how strongly these things fit you. So actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to position this more like an assessment. So I will phrase them as I am statements. And as I'm going through them, maybe you can rate yourself and go, strongly disagree to strongly agree, or 1 through 10, or something like that. But I think these are things that stand out from a winner's perspective, a champion's perspective, from an effective leader's perspective, that these folks do quite well. I think I have 10 of them, which is a nice round number. And let's see how it goes. All right. So the first thing is, I'm going to phrase this as an I am statement. I want you to put yourself in the statement and think about it. So, number 1, I consistently see myself as a winner, even when I'm behind or losing. Now that's interesting, because what I do think that winners do very well is that they see themselves as winners consistently, even when they are losing. And sometimes, especially when they're losing, because they expect themselves to win. They expect themselves to be able to elevate and raise to the occasion. There's a mindset of, hey, just give me one more chance and I'll get it done. Just give me one more opportunity. If I could get the ball one more time, or if I had one more go at it, I would figure out how to get this done. And if I were to swap out a word and say, I consistently see myself as a leader, even when things aren't going well, or even though I don't have people directly reporting to me, do you and can you consistently see yourself as a leader, even in those circumstances? I work with leaders, and sometimes they struggle with just seeing themselves as a leader. And that is 100% a mindset. And if you are having a hard time seeing yourself in that way, part of the work is figuring out, what don't I understand about what I bring or what the value I have. The other thing is, do you have that song, like all I do is win, 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 no matter what, in regular rotation in the soundtrack of your mind? I love that song, or at least the first part of it. I play it sometimes and my kids just look at me and roll their eyes, but you know what? I don't need their permission. So that's the first one. I consistently see myself as a winner, or I consistently see myself as a leader, even when I'm behind or when things aren't going well. How would you rate yourself on that? Number 2, I don't avoid feedback, and I don't get defensive when I receive it. Oh, this one's a hot one. Partly because, and to be fair, in the workplace, generally people don't always know how to give effective feedback. A lot of times they're all emotional and they don't know how to pull out the objective things. They don't know how to talk about the impact. So that's fair. Sometimes we can get a little bit riled up, especially if the feedback that we're getting is not structured in a way that's the most helpful. But apart from that, do you avoid it? And do you easily get defensive when you receive it? The ability to turn things into a learning opportunity is key. And that is very different from seeing yourself as a loser or making the feedback about you. Because when somebody's giving you feedback, they're thinking about them and they're thinking about their experience and your role in that experience. So part of it as a leader is you also then thinking about them and being curious as to, okay, well, how might I be coming across that's creating this level of impact, even though that may not have been your intention. And sometimes it could be an understanding or way to see that you've hit a ceiling with your capacity or competency or skill. And it gives you an opportunity to figure out what it is that you might need to work on, which then feeds into the third one that I'm going to give you, which is I know how to, and I regularly evaluate the projects and tasks I'm involved in, even if it is simply how my day or week went. So I know how to, and I regularly evaluate things, myself, my day, things that are going on around me. Winners and effective leaders have regular time carved out for evaluation. And this definitely helps with resiliency because it enables you to put things into perspective and think about what you can do differently. And that's what evaluation is meant to do. It's not designed or it's not meant to make you feel bad and look at all the ways you messed up. And sometimes that's how we take those things. But again, thinking about coming from a place of learning, from growth, from curiosity, how can we evaluate in a way that is most helpful and beneficial? And there are a couple of ways that you can do this. I've heard of rose, thorn, and bud. I use something way more simpler than that. There's 3 steps to it because it doesn't have to take a long time and it definitely does not need to be a big, heavy burden. So the first thing you want to do is you want to start out with what worked. Always start with what worked. Always start with positive because it opens up your mind to look for things that are positive. We typically don't need help with the negative. We really don't need a whole lot of help thinking about what didn't work. So always start with what worked, even if you can only come up with one thing. What went well with that presentation, or what went well in my day to day? What went well in that interaction with that person? Because it's important that you're able to break things down, especially when things are going well. Let's say you had a big win. Starting with what worked gives you an opportunity to break it down to its smaller components so you can understand what you can use the next time in order to be just as effective and just as powerful. The second part of the evaluation then is, after you've thought about what worked, is, okay, now let me think about what didn't work. So now you have an opportunity to look at just an area, or you can maybe you list out all the things that didn't work. And what are the things that you saw that perhaps may have created or caused an issue? And this is also important even in a win, because then there's opportunities that you can go, okay, well, this is something that we can certainly tweak to do it better the next time. And then third step to evaluating is, what am I going to do differently the next time? And here is what's important about this part is you want to think about and be willing to experiment and try different things. But the key is to pick just 1 or 2 things that you're going to focus on, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself and try and change too many things. First of all, like I said, it gets overwhelming. But then second of all, if you change too many things, you won't know or understand what had the biggest impact. So from a leadership perspective, as you're thinking about this, don't be afraid to break things down like this. Champions are great at envisioning things going well. And you know what? They're actually really good at envisioning things that don't go well and how they're going to handle it. There's a story, the year that Michael Phelps won, 8 or 10 gold medals or something like that. In one of his races, when he dove into the water, you could see that his goggles shifted or something, and they filled with water. He basically did the whole race not being able to see, and he still won and got the gold medal. And afterwards, during the interview, the interviewer asked him, how in the world did you do that? And basically he said, first of all, I've done this so many times, but I've also envisioned doing this so many times that I knew exactly what I needed to be doing, how many strokes, and where I was. And then secondly, I also prepared for contingencies like this. I also practiced with my eyes closed. I also practiced for something like this going wrong. And when you're a swimmer with goggles, probably getting water in your eyes is a common thing, I would guess. But champions also, they don't only focus on the positive and things going well. They also do a good job of thinking about, okay, what am I going to do if things don't go well? So they don't panic or freak out in the moment. And they don't make it a hit to their ego if they don't win. It's always a learning opportunity. This is a place where a lot of high achievers don't give themselves enough time or a grace period necessary for making adjustments and learning. And this is something a lot of times I have to help clients slow down a little bit. They just want to go on to the next thing. Well, how do I get there? Which we will get there, but you have to take time and give yourself a grace period. They feel like they have to knock it out of the park the first time and every time. And that kind of pressure is unreasonable and it doesn't allow for growth. So if you're someone that is constantly or consistently feeling frustrated or angry that you didn't get something done, think about, have you given yourself time to fail and learn enough so that you can get it done properly. It always amazes me when somebody tries something for the first time and it doesn't go well, how angry they can get. Like, you've never done this before. Like, what are you thinking here? It's a little bit of an ego to think that, okay, I can do this without practice. Especially those, again, high achievers tend to, sometimes things can go easily for them, or they can get things done really quickly or learn really quickly. And when it doesn't go that way, sometimes they can think, oh, something must be wrong here. I promise you, nothing has gone wrong at all. There's just something you need to learn. You've hit a ceiling in your capacity and you need to grow through that. Okay, so number 4, I don't focus on the competition. First and foremost, I focus within. Wow. So here, how much of your time is spent focused externally versus what's going on the inside? This is another huge conversation that I'm constantly talking to clients about. I talk about it in with respect of giving your power away. When so much of what you're focused on is that external validation, that makes it very difficult for you to focus on what you need to be working on internally. But champions, especially in losing situations, they're able to focus on me. How can I be better? And not in a negative way. They're not beating themselves up. They're thinking about, what do I need to do in this situation? What's in my toolbox that I can pull out in order to elevate my game? I was watching the end of a college basketball game the other day. It was Iowa and Nebraska for the Big Ten championship. And Iowa was down about 7 points with 2 minutes left in the game. And I tell you what, they were able to make a shift, and each one of them internally started focusing on what their strengths were. They sent the game into overtime, and ultimately they came out with the win. There's no way they should have won that game. But that's where champions take that internally and go, okay, what do I need to do to elevate? What can I bring to this so that they can then move on for the win? All right, number 5. I am not easily distracted. I am able to focus and be present in the moment. This one can be tough, especially when things are going wrong, because a lot of times our brains are, okay, I'm moving on to the next thing. This project is a fail. This person isn't working out. I don't need to be here. I'm moving on. But the difference between champions and effective leaders is that they are able to slow their mind down so that they can be really, really present and focus on what actually can make a difference here. Have you ever seen someone make something super complex seem easy? This is a skill that they have, because they're able to see what's going on. And it's a situation, you've probably heard this phrase, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. If you can slow things down to be able to vision and pinpoint what actually needs to change and then make that change, on the outside, it looks like it happened really quickly. But when you are not distracted, when you're able to focus, when you're able to be present in the moment, it allows you to see a lot more of what's going on in that moment, which is a really, really cool thing. So rather than moving on to the next thing, if things just aren't necessarily working out, see if you can slow down a little bit. Step back into the moment. Don't be distracted. If that meeting is going off the rails, if that presentation just did not start off well, take a beat, take a breath. Slow down. It's okay to start over. It's okay to take a moment. I think people would rather see that and then you regroup and end with a bang than just rush through or just throw your hands up and think, oh, forget it. This isn't going to go well at all. So that distraction is an area to allow yourself to then focus and be present. All right. So number 6, I don't compare and despair. How are you at doing this? What do I mean by compare and despair? What I mean by that is champions and winners don't walk around looking at what everybody else is doing and then feeling bad about themselves because they're not doing that same thing. They're not thinking about, well, I should be here or there, or why am I not there? They're not thinking about, well, gosh, I'm more qualified, so why didn't this good thing happen to me? Compare and despair is you're looking at your situation and then you're looking at someone else's situation. Usually they're in a position that you'd like to be in and you're going, why am I not there yet? I was working with a client recently and She had been on track to, well, she still is, but she was on track to become a VP in a relatively short amount of time. Just prior to that, the organization went through huge changes. So it's a big organization, and her entire business unit got picked up and moved to another division, another part of the business, where she didn't have the relationships or the influence that she had previously. And so now she feels like, well, I've got to start over a little bit. I've got to rebuild relationships. I have to rebuild the influences that I had. Meanwhile, she's looking at some of her peers who didn't get moved, and they have gotten their promotion that they were expecting to get. And some of them trying to be encouraging or thinking that it's positive or coming and saying, hey, well, how in the world did I get here and not you? It's not really helping her, but they're well-meaning. But still, we had to talk a lot about, okay, let's not compare and despair. Let's focus on what you need to do in order to get you there to begin with. And so she had to switch her strategy. She had to switch up what she was doing. And it's not that it's not going to happen. It's just a matter at this point now of, yes, time, but also what additional skills does she need to develop in order to get there? Sometimes it also happens when you're comparing your beginning or middle to someone else's end. That's another trap that we can fall into. When we're looking through to someone who has gone through things that either we're just now starting to face, and we're looking at them going, oh my gosh, that seems so easy for them. But we don't know what they've gone through. What's going to be beneficial for you is the best lane to stay in when it comes to looking at your own success. All right, number 7, I don't rely on the win for validation. This can be tough. Winning is great. There is something about it. Yes, there is a validation in winning. And champions, they understand who they are, win or lose. At the end of a season, there's only one team that's going to, have the trophy. But doesn't mean that everyone else is not a winner. And those who then continue to come back and compete time and time again, they understand that maybe it just wasn't my time. What else can I go back and learn? We go back to the evaluation process. And failing does not necessarily make them a loser. It just means that they lost. It's just a part of that process. It's an opportunity to learn more. So sometimes we get so much validation or we make the win mean so much more than it needs to be, rather than what can we learn from the situation. All right, number 8, I understand that at the highest levels of competition, it boils down to mindset. If you talk to at the highest levels of leadership, at the highest levels in any field, the differentiation in skill level is fairly small. Of course, you have your outliers who are just mind-boggling brilliant. Yes. So I'm not talking about the outliers. I'm talking about all of us, essentially, that once we hit a certain level, it becomes about seeing yourself as that leader, as that winner. And it's the ability to lead when there's uncertainty, when there's volatility, when things are ambiguous, when there's confusion. At a certain level, it's about how well can you manage your mind, your team, drive influence, and be calm under pressure. Because, and this is what's interesting, is when people realize that as you move up in leadership, a lot of times people go, well, I can't be a leader because they know so much more than me. Likely not. They may have more experience than you, certainly at that level, but it's not because they have it all figured out. And as soon as people realize, oh my gosh, we're all just trying to figure it out, kind of levels the playing field a little bit. There's nothing keeping you from being able to achieve more except your ability to continue to work on your mindset and to work on seeing yourself in that space. And with that comes a lot of other things for sure, but it starts with you even believing that that's something that's possible. But that's the game. Being able to make decisions quickly, being able to execute quickly, being able to not be afraid to mess things up and then quickly recover, that's a part of it. Number 9, I am persistent and resilient and welcome failure as a part of the growth path. guess this feeds right in from the last one that I was just talking about. Understanding and even thinking that obstacles are not insurmountable. Champions, leaders, winners, I don't say welcome adversity, but they don't necessarily run from adversity. They understand that it comes with the territory. Not everybody is going to like what you do. Not everybody's going to like you. That's another thing about leadership is, you're going to have a style. You're going to have the way that you lead. And sometimes not everybody's going to be on board with that. And how do you handle that? Doesn't mean you're not a leader. It's how can you still establish yourself and not just have the influence, but be effective in getting things done, even when there is a disconnect at different levels. And that nothing is insurmountable. There's just opportunities to learn. All right. Now, number 10, I can move around in the discomfort zone. Yeah, and this one is also challenging because when things get off track, winners are able to adjust relatively quickly. When things just kind of fall off the rails, again, we take it back to some of the things we've already talked about. They're able to evaluate really quickly. Why can they evaluate quickly in that moment? Because they've been practicing evaluating along the way. So they can quickly see, okay, what's working, what's not working, what do I need to do differently in this moment? When things get uncomfortable, many people get stuck. They're just looking at what's wrong with the situation. Winners are able to go, okay, well, here now is our new circumstance. We're behind the 8 ball. What do we need to do? Because things are always going to go off the rails. There are always going to be challenges. This is particularly challenging for perfectionists because they rely on things going perfectly well and following the plan that they played out in order for it to be successful. And it rarely happens that way. And that's where perfectionists can get stuck with not even trying things because, oh no, what if something fails? Versus something's going to fail, but that's okay because I'm going to be able to work around it and we'll figure it out as we go along. So listen, I hope that this was helpful for you. I want you to go through and evaluate for you and where you want to make adjustments. Certainly not all of them are going to be applicable, but what fits you, take it. The rest, just throw away. That's another thing that a leader does really well is go, this applies to me, and this one doesn't. It's been great hanging out with you today. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I will see you next time.